She wakes before the sun, her fingers numb from the cold floor. The air is heavy with the scent of coal and soap. She moves quietly, careful not to wake the household. There are fires to light, floors to scrub, and water to fetch before the city even stirs. Across town, another woman wakes moments later. Her room is warm, her breakfast waiting on a silver tray. She lingers in bed as the maid draws the curtains, letting in a pale, uncertain light. Outside, the same London hums, carriages rattling, bells ringing, smoke rising into the dawn they will never meet. Their worlds could not be more different, and yet both live under the same unspoken law, the law of what it meant to be a woman in Victorian Britain, a world that promised order and respectability, but demanded silence and sacrifice in return. And to understand that world, to truly see the boundaries that shaped every woman's life, we have to step back for a moment, to look at the city itself and the invisible lines that divided it. Victorian Britain was a world of contrasts. Steam engines thundered through the countryside, factories lit up the night, and fortunes were made in cities thick with smoke. People called it an age of progress, but for women, progress often stopped at the front door. A woman's life was defined before it began. Her duty was clear: to obey, to care, and to keep silent. Education was limited, choices were few, and marriage was not just expected, it was survival. In drawing rooms, women were taught to be graceful, polite, and pleasing. In working-class homes, they labored from dawn till dark, their hands cracked from endless chores. Even the laws of the land reminded them of their place. A woman could not vote, own property, or control her own wages. To be born a woman in Victorian Britain was to live within invisible walls, built not of stone, but of expectation. Rules whispered through nursery rhymes, enforced by fathers, husbands, and the quiet judgment of society. Some walls were gilded with comfort, others stained with soot, but all held the same power, to keep a woman in her place. And yet behind those walls, life went on. Every morning fires were lit, kettles boiled, and carriages rolled through the fog. From drawing rooms to servant quarters, each woman began her day under the same pale light, the same rising sun over a divided world. Let's step into one of those mornings and see how two women, born to different stations, bound by the same expectations, began their day. The day began early for most Victorian women, but how early depended on who you were. For a servant, morning started long before sunrise. The city was still dark, and the air smelled of smoke and damp stone. In kitchens below ground, maids stumbled from their narrow beds and pulled on coarse uniforms that never seemed to warm them. They lit fires in every room, polished shoes, fetched water, and swept staircases, all before their employers had even opened their eyes. The work never stopped. Every creak of a floorboard or sound of a bell meant another task. The average servant could walk 20,000 steps a day, most of them up and down stairs, carrying trays of food or heavy buckets of coal. Their hands cracked from scrubbing, their backs ached, and still they were expected to remain invisible, quiet, polite, and grateful. Upstairs, the world looked entirely different. A lady's morning began with a soft knock at her door. A maid entered quietly, drawing back the curtains to let in the pale light. Breakfast was served in bed, tea, bread, and fruit arranged neatly on a silver tray. She would dress slowly, her corset tightened by another's hands, her hair arranged into curls or pinned beneath a bonnet. While one woman's day began with exhaustion, the other's began with elegance. Yet both were bound by the same unspoken rule: obedience. The servant obeyed her mistress. The mistress obeyed society. As the maid scrubbed the marble floor until it shone, she caught a glimpse of her own reflection, tired eyes, red hands, and wondered if this would be her life forever. Upstairs, the lady glanced out the window, watching the same world, but from a place of comfort and isolation. She had freedom from labor, but not from expectation. Both were called respectable. Both were expected to know their place. But only one was allowed to rest. The clock struck 9. London was fully awake. Factories roared. Carriages rolled through cobbled streets. And the rhythm of the day began. A rhythm built on women's labor, seen and unseen. By afternoon, the divide of class gave way to another form of control, the control of the mind. From the moment a girl could walk, her path was set. If she was born into wealth, she might be taught to read, to play the piano, and to speak French, not for her own independence, but to appear refined enough to marry well. Her education was an ornament, not a tool. Girls learned how to sit, how to smile, how to keep their voices gentle. They practiced needlework and letter writing, studied manners, and learned that curiosity was dangerous, that thinking too much could make a woman unfeminine. In working-class homes, education was often a luxury. Many girls left school by the age of 10 to help their mothers with washing, sewing, or taking care of younger children. Their lessons in life were not written in books, but in blisters, sweat, and sacrifice. Still, there were those who refused to accept this quiet fate. A few girls looked at their brothers, allowed to study, to travel, to dream, and whispered to themselves, "Why not me?" For them, rebellion began with a book. Some read by candlelight after their chores were done, hiding pages beneath their pillows. Others found courage in stories of women who dared to speak out, women like Mary Wollstonecraft, whose writings had once been dismissed as dangerous, or Florence Nightingale, who walked away from comfort to serve the sick in war. But every act of defiance came with a price. A woman who spoke too boldly risked being called unfeminine, unlovable, or worse, mad. Society did not need to punish her with prison. Shame was enough. Her reputation could vanish with a single whisper. The afternoon light faded and the sound of church bells filled the air, a reminder of duty and propriety. Girls were taught that their future was not something to choose, but something to accept. For every woman who dreamed of freedom, 100 were taught to fear it. And yet, those small acts of rebellion, the secret reading, the unspoken questions, were the first quiet sparks of change. Still, that change was far away. For now, most women prepared for the evening, and for the role that defined their entire lives: wife. As evening fell, lamps were lit and families gathered around dinner tables. For many, this was the heart of respectability, the image of harmony and domestic grace that Victorians held dear. But behind that image was control. Marriage was seen as every woman's highest purpose, yet it was also her greatest loss of freedom. From the moment she said "I do," the law no longer saw her as an individual. Her husband owned her property, her income, even her body. Anything she earned or inherited automatically became his. Love, in theory, was sacred. In reality, it was often a cage. Middle-class wives were expected to maintain the home, bear children, and serve their husbands with patience and silence. A woman who complained was called ungrateful. A woman who refused was called disobedient. Divorce was rare and scandalous, and if she left, she could lose her children forever. Working-class wives faced a different kind of hardship. Many labored beside their husbands in factories or laundries, earning a fraction of a man's wage. Others took in sewing or washing at home, balancing endless work with childcare. Their evenings were not spent in leisure but in exhaustion. And still, they were told they were the heart of the household, even as that household left them with no rest. No rights and often no say. In novels and poetry, love was painted as pure and noble. But real life told a harsher story. A woman could not even claim her own name without her husband's permission. She could not sign a contract, own a business, or keep her own wages. In the eyes of the law, she was not her own person. She was someone's wife, someone's daughter, someone's property. As the night deepened, the city fell quiet again. Servants finished their final chores and slipped away to cold attics. Ladies retired to candlelit rooms, corsets unfastened, hairpins set aside. For a brief moment, the world was still, and in that silence, one could almost hear the questions that so many women carried in their hearts. Questions they could not ask aloud. Was this all there was? Was obedience the same as happiness? Could love exist without freedom? Tomorrow the same routines would begin again. The same bells would ring. The same rules would whisper through every corridor. But beneath that stillness something was stirring. The first quiet thoughts of change. Born from tired hearts and restless minds. Because even in a world that tried to silence them, Victorian women were never truly silent. They endured, they adapted, and some, slowly and bravely, began to fight back. Change, at first, was almost invisible. A murmur in drawing rooms, a sentence in a letter, a refusal spoken softly but meant fiercely. Every quiet act, every choice to step beyond the expected, became part of something larger. A movement not yet named, but already breathing beneath the surface of everyday life. And that's where the story turns. From endurance to defiance, from silence to sound. Change rarely begins with noise. In Victorian Britain, it started as a whisper. While most women were told to stay within their roles, a few began to question them, softly, cautiously, but persistently. Letters, diaries, and private conversations became the first sparks of rebellion. Behind lace curtains and closed doors, ideas began to grow. Dangerous ideas about education, equality, and choice. Some of these voices came from unexpected places. A governess who dared to publish a novel under a man's name. A nurse who defied her family to serve in war hospitals. A widow who used her small inheritance to open a school for girls. Each act seemed small, but together, they chipped away at the walls that had trapped generations. Outside, the world was shifting too. Factories were hiring women. Newspapers printed debates about women's rights. The first petitions for property reform appeared in Parliament. It was still a man's world, but the cracks were beginning to show. Not everyone approved. Many called these women unnatural, unfeminine, or mad, but still they wrote. They taught, they worked, and most importantly, they refused to be silent. For the first time, women began to see one another not just as daughters, wives, or servants, but as something greater, individuals capable of thought, purpose, and power. And though real freedom was still far away, the silence that had lasted for centuries was finally breaking. One voice. One story, one act of courage at a time. Those voices, once whispers in shadowed rooms, now echo through history. They remind us that change doesn't begin in grand halls or with royal decrees. It begins with ordinary women who refuse to remain unseen. And so, as we look back on their world, it's worth remembering the truth that connects it to ours. Two women, worlds apart, yet bound by the same invisible rules. Both lived lives shaped by expectation, one by labor, the other by restraint. And though neither could see it then, both played a part in the slow turning of history. Every letter written, every secret dream, every small act of defiance, they were the threads that would one day unravel the silence. The Victorian woman was told her place was in the home. Yet, it was her endurance, her will, and her quiet strength that built the foundation for the freedoms we now call ordinary. When we speak of progress, we often think of great inventions or mighty empires. But sometimes the greatest revolutions begin not with power, but with patience. So the next time you read about this era, remember the millions of women whose stories never made it into books, yet shaped the world all the same. Because history is not just written by those who ruled it. It's whispered by those who endured it. If you'd like to uncover more forgotten lives from the Victorian age, the rebels, the dreamers, and the silenced, stay with us. There's much more to tell.